Hello and welcome to the Arts Council's first ever live stream diversity webinar, coming to you from the Barbican in London. I'm Andrew Miller, a National Council member of both Arts Council England and the Arts Council of Wales, and I'm also the Government's Disability Champion for Arts and Culture. Today I'm going to be joined by Arts Council England's Chair, Sir Nicholas Serota, Director of Diversity at the Arts Council, Abid Hussain, Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra's Head of BSL Participate, Lisa Tregale, and from the University of the Arts London, Mark Crawley, Dean of Students, and Caroline Huntley, Head of the Disability Service. We'll be talking through the headlines of the latest Arts Council Diversity Report, which is published today, and hearing from UAL and Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra on the very different work those organisations have been doing around equality and diversity. And we'll also be hearing from you. We've been collating questions in the run-up to today's broadcast, and if we don't manage to get to yours in the session today, we will come back to you directly. So please do keep sending them in as we are coming to you live. First of all, Nick and Abid, welcome. Why this live stream? Why now?
Well, Andrew, last year, you probably remember, we ran a big event at Nottingham Playhouse where we talked about creative case, we talked about recruitment, leadership, programming, audiences. But this is a discussion that needs to happen throughout the year. And I think the webinar is a very good way of kicking off a discussion that we expect will continue throughout 2019, rather than just waiting until early 2020 before coming back to this issue.
Abid.
Yeah, the live stream just feels like a natural transition from the events that we've done in previous years. The majority of our audiences over the last couple of years have joined the events through online platforms or social media. So today is just a really good opportunity to go through the report and look at some of the headlines in terms of the challenges that we face in the sector.
Thank you both. As Nick said, we're going to focus much of today's discussion on disability. Later, we'll be joined by Mark and Caroline from UAL, who will take us through their successful approach to disability in a higher education context. We'll also hear from Lisa from the BSO, who've been leading the way for inclusion in classical music, and I'm looking forward to hearing what we might learn from both those organisations shortly. First of all, we're going to focus on the Arts Council's Equality, Diversity and the Creative Case report, which, as we've heard, has been published today. Nick, why do we have a diversity report every year?
Well, we collect data on an annual basis, Andrew. It's important that we should do that because we want to know where we stand. We want to be able to measure progress. We also want to know where we're treading water, where we're not making the progress that we would expect to make. And the data is very revealing because it shows differences between organisations that you would find difficult to explain just on the face of it, why they should be so different. Differences in art forms. Museums, for instance, do very poorly in some respects in terms of leadership and recruitment. So having these figures on an annual basis gives us a measure. I think next year we'll be looking at a different kind of portfolio and we would expect to see a different result. But what interests me is to see what's happening on a like-for-like basis. So I'm hoping that we'll see progress next year.
And Abid, what does this moment add?
Well, our organisations spend a lot of time capturing the data that they share with us, so I think it's important from our perspective, both in terms of transparency and accountability, to share that data back with the sector. The data is also really important in shaping our work as a policy maker, so it informs our policy work around equality and diversity and our equality objectives. And I think it's important to remember that we distribute funding both from the government and the National Lottery. So it's really important that our investment reflects the communities that provide the funding to support our work.
And what are some of the key trends across the workforce and leadership in MPOs this year?
Well, if I start with gender and ethnicity to begin with, gender, we've seen some really good progress in terms of an increase in the number of female chief executives and artistic directors. There's a bit more work for us to be doing in terms of addressing the lower number of female chairs within our portfolio. In terms of the BME workforce, about 12% of the MPO portfolio, the workforce comes from a BME background, and about 5% for our major partner museums, and that compares to around 20% of the working age population. So you can see there's a bit of a disconnect between our arts organisations and our museums. In terms of our museums, our major partner museums currently reflect about 21 organisations. In next year's figures, we'll have data from over 60 museums, so it'll be interesting to see if there's any changes there. And I think one of the things we're really grappling with at the moment, and we need to tackle head on, is the high volume of unknown data that's still coming back to us.
And unknowns are a key issue here, aren't they, Nick? Are they having what impact are they having overall?
Well, too many organisations are not providing the data that we're looking for. And I've written to chairs now of organisations that are consistently failing to produce the data. We need that data for the reasons that Abid's mentioned. We're here to use government and lottery money well. We're here to ensure that we represent communities as a whole. If we don't have the data, we can't do that.
And let's go back to some of those increases that you mentioned, Abid. You know better than most people that diversity and inclusion is a long-term project. Yet we've seen some fantastically progressive appointments in senior leadership roles in theatres in London in the last year. That didn't happen overnight, did it?
No, absolutely. So we've seen a positive trend in London, and it's primarily been within theatre, and it's certainly been the case in terms of ethnicity and in terms of gender. I think a key part of that work has been some of the policy initiatives that we've been developing over the last few years. Some of this change takes time. The work that we've done around the creative case for diversity, for example, has seen an increase in the diversity of work that's presented on stage. And when you have that, you begin to reflect a bit more on the changes that you need to see off stage. I think there's been a key role for boards to play. So the greater the diversity in the boardrooms, the more diverse the decision making becomes in terms of those key appointments, and I think that plays a key role. What I do want to see is that trend kind of go beyond theatre and beyond London, which I think is fairly critical. And there's also been a lot of support from the sector. So I think the unions, including BEC2 and Equity, have been incredible advocates for the equality and diversity agenda. The work that the ABO have done, Sphinx Theatre, and organisations like Artistic Directors of the Future, they play a key role as well. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the key challenge for me now is how do we replicate some of that good progress that we're seeing at a leadership level in terms of gender and race, in terms of disability, because there's a long way for us to go to kind of get up to speed there.
Absolutely. And what do these changes look like in statistical terms from the latest report?
Well, certainly from a disability perspective, if you look at the wider working age population, approximately 20% of people would define as disabled. And if you then looked at the data for our portfolio, it's around 5% for our national portfolio organisations and 4% for our major partner museums. So you see a fairly significant disconnect there.
Big challenges ahead. Thanks, Abid. As sector champion, increasing the disabled workforce is one of my priorities. There are several issues at play here. Lack of self-declarations being one of them. Few cultural organisations being disability confident is another. Disability confident being a government-backed scheme designed to encourage employers to take on disabled staff. Abid, I'm interested in what the Arts Council can actually do to encourage the sector to improve their record here.
Well, one of the things we've recently done is we've signed up to the Disability Confidence Scheme, so we can see the value of the scheme in terms of actually helping us to kind of achieve that ambition of supporting more disabled people in the workforce. I guess one of the challenges we do face as a sector is many of our artists who are trying to then access to support have encountered a number of challenges and issues which have been incredibly frustrating, and it causes a real issue for those artists. So one of the things I'm really interested in is how the Arts Council can work with the Department for Work and Pensions, but most importantly the artists themselves, to close that gap, I guess, between the aspiration that we all agree on in terms of disability confident, but to make sure that access to work is a scheme that can genuinely support people who want to make work, and rather than kind of creating an additional barrier, which sometimes it is doing. One of the things we've done recently is worked with Disability Arts Online to commission a new toolkit that will help artists and arts organisations working with disabled artists to navigate their way around access to work, and I hope that's going to make a fairly significant difference.
And I'm hoping to be able to join you in supporting you in that work with the DWP. Let's move on to creative case ratings, Nick. What does the picture look like across the sector?
Well, there's been an improvement this year, Andrew. I mean, we assess creative case against a number of elements, including recruitment and people employed, programs, leadership, commitment to involving new talent. And the figure's gone up over the year from 16-17 to 17-18. It's gone up from 45 to 51%. That's a significant increase in a year. But next year we're going to refine the way we do this. We're going to obviously have a not met category, a met category. We'll have a good category as we do at the present, and we'll also have an outstanding category, because I think we really want to highlight those organisations that are doing really good work in this field.
And what about the Arts Council itself in all of this, Abid? What's the picture of the Arts Council?
Well, the purpose of today's webinar is really to kind of talk about the importance of equality and diversity, and certainly from an Arts Council perspective we need to be able to walk the talk on this as much as the sector, and I think we've got as much, if not more, work to do than the sector. So about 9% of our workforce is from a BME background, 6% are disabled. We've had more success in terms of seeing an increase in female leadership within the organisation, which has been a positive step. But I think I just reflect back to the conversations I had at the Unlimited Symposium last year when we were talking about the lack of representation of disabled people in the workforce, but also I guess more broadly in terms of making work. And it's really, really key for the Arts Council to be seen as an employer that disabled people want to work for. We need to be removing any barriers that people are facing, and I think if we can have disabled people informing our policy making, informing the way our funding's distributed, but also having a very honest conversation about the things we can do better, then I think we'll see a shift in our culture and our ability to kind of see the progress we want to see.
Great. Abid, Nick, thank you very much for the moment. Time to bring in some new voices from the University of the Arts in London. But just before we hear from them, here's a short film introducing some of the work of UAL.
Everybody here is kind of so different. Everyone's from all over the world. London's very much an international city. So you get to meet a lot of different creative people. You get to experience a lot of different kinds of cultures and things. And you're never bored in London. Like, there's so much inspiration everywhere. The art scene is like one of the best in the world.
I've met so many amazing, talented, creative students, and I just feel quite privileged that I got to meet them within this environment, within a creative environment.
It's just a period of time to develop yourself as a creative thinker, as a practitioner, and to have that room to explore and to get to know so many amazing people.
Great film, giving us a snapshot of what the university does and what it means to its students. Undoubtedly, one of the reasons the disabled workforce is so low is that entry routes into the industry are very challenging for disabled artists and creatives. But UAL are a rare success story in this field. I'm now joined by Caroline and Mark from UAL. Welcome. Mark, would you like to share the journey with us that UAL's been on?
Thanks, Andrew. I'm going to say something about the practical steps that we've taken and the impact that that's had. But first of all, just to say a bit about why we're on this journey. We're partway through this journey, why we started it. About 10 years ago, we looked at our data. We were concerned about the success rates for our disabled students, and we were concerned about the number of students who were declaring as disabled as being lower than we expected. And we were particularly concerned about the declaration rates for staff. We had declaration rates of about 4%, which is about the figure now for the arts sector. It's really important as well as in terms of who we are. We're the largest art and design institution in Europe. We're ranked 6th in the world. Creativity, social justice and equality are at the heart of what we do. And our graduates are the creative practitioners and creative leaders of the future, and so it's really important that we produce a very diverse range of people as part of the pipeline going into the sector.
Absolutely. Caroline, what practical steps did you take?
So some of these steps sound really simple, but we'd hope that you might consider how these might be replicated and the impact that they might have. So first of all, we've increased our spending significantly. We do understand that this is a constraint for some, but we now spend around £3 million on support services. So these include provision of SPLD diagnostic assessments and an increase in access to professionals for disability and mental health to support staff and students. And beyond investment, we've also thought about the support, and we've rolled out individual support agreements for students, disability equality training and mental health training for staff at UAL. And we've also thought about champions and thought about how we streamline our services, and this has led to us creating specialist roles in IT and in HR, and we have a disability and neurodiversity champion on our board. And what this has led to is 27% of our UK-based students and 11.1% of staff declaring that they identify as disabled people.
These really are outstanding results from this work, but it also represents considerable cultural change, doesn't it, Mark?
Yes, it does. We've really focused on creating a culture of trust and of safety and of people understanding the benefits of declaring disability. It's been really important for us to look at removing the barriers using the social model of disability, so that people see how what we're focusing on and how declaring can improve the position for everybody, but also that recognising that through their work our students and indeed our staff are exploring their identity, and disability is important for that. What's really exciting is that our graduates are the creative practitioners and cultural leaders of the future, and we feel that, that this work will mean that there is a positive change as those people move out into the sector and indeed become leaders in the sector.
Mark, Caroline, you're doing fantastic work at UL. Thank you very much for joining us. I believe UAL's achievements here are really impressive. We know, for example, in the performing arts, the picture in conservatoires and drama schools is far less good. But what I'm hearing is that simple and practical steps make a huge difference, not least streamlining access to adjustment fining, but putting in place specialist staff and advocates. And I guess putting it out there that disabled people are welcomed and valued and will be adequately supported. Now, Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra have been doing some excellent work around disability, which is changing their organisational DNA. Participating in the Arts Council Changemaker programme with conductor James Rose, here is a short film that charts their journey to bring the first disabled-led ensemble at the BBC Proms last summer.
We are a disabled ensemble that features people who have disabilities, and they know how to use them to their advantage. So that way they can be able to play music regardless of what disabilities they have.
It's the first time that an orchestra has gone, no, we're going to facilitate this. That is really groundbreaking. We're going to ensure that the way we work means that I can participate rather than I can't participate. I still walk around my house pinching myself about that.
I am constantly being challenged. I think it is me as a person. I'm living it.
Everyone's so friendly and supportive, and sort of all the staff seem to work from a social model of disability rather than a medical model, which is so refreshing and unique.
Everybody has their own unique challenges, and it's how you sort of face those and overcome them. It's forced me to sort of find ways to overcome challenges with my autism, and rather than just hiding in a shell.
Music is for all. It's not just for a certain type of audience, not for a certain type of people. It's to include everyone. Music is for everyone's enjoyment.
Our disabilities aren't the forefront of our performance, it's the music, and it makes the point that everyone can play and create beautiful music if they're given the right opportunities and the right supports.
Great stuff, and a fantastically memorable prom from last summer. We're now joined by Lisa from the BSL. Welcome, Lisa. Can you share how working with James has changed the organisation and the orchestra?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, and working with James as our change maker was and really is just the start of the process of cultural change for us as an organisation. It's made us think literally about everything that we do, through to recruitment and programming, right through to how we communicate as a company. I think one of the really key things for us is about our commitment through the process has been through the entire organisation, from board and senior management level right through to players and the administration team. And we've really truly worked together on this. And it's had a real huge impact on our audiences and the artists that we work with. BSO, Resound and James have been great role models, and we've really seen that empowering the people that they've been working with and our audience members.
That's great to hear. And BSO are remarkable in another aspect, in your workforce demographic, which is one of the highest percentages of disabled people of any MPO at around 18%. How do you account for that?
I think there's some really key ingredients to make that happen. The first is the implementation of the social model of disability across the company, and in the way that we work and the work that we do out beyond the concert hall as well. Also, we've created equality champions across administration and players to work together to look at all the processes and the areas of work that we do as a company, and to keep that really on the agenda and ongoing as we develop as a company. And also signing up to be a disability confident programme, as you mentioned earlier on before. We've really learnt to embrace that sometimes you have to ask quite difficult questions of yourselves as an organisation, and actually to do that and not be fearful of doing that, and because when you do that you have really successful outcomes of those sort of conversations. And also through the work that we've done, all our company has had disability and equality training, and through that I think it's also given people the confidence to maybe declare that they identify themselves as disabled where before they might not have done that.
You mentioned difficult conversations. Can you give an example, a flavour of what those conversations are?
Well, it's very easy to say, well, that's how we do something because that's the way we've always done it. So actually questioning why, and actually should we continue to do things that way just because that's the way you've always done something.
And I'm sure everyone will want to know what happens next for James and how will BSO support him on that journey?
Yeah, so James officially entered as a change maker at December last year, so he's going to actually stay with us for another year to develop his conducting and his networks, and then he'll be part of the freelance workforce, and BSO Resound are now part of our core ensemble portfolio.
That's great news. BSO are doing some fantastic work in this. Thanks very much for joining us, Lisa. Now, before we start answering your questions, here is a short film about the Arts Council's creative case that we wanted to share with you.
I'd very much like to welcome you all here today to Creative Case, Leading Diverse Futures, our 4th annual diversity event. And I want to thank Stephanie and Adam Pemford and Nottingham Playhouse for hosting us.
Fantastic gathering together of people from right across the arts and culture sector, publishing the new data that we've gathered from across the sector over the past 12 months, but also discussing and debating a very, very important subject.
It was great to start off the day at 10 o'clock with Michelle's workshop. That for me was great, but also that there are a lot of people who are asking questions that are challenging from the audience.
You don't have to have a title of changemaker to make change. And a lot of changes do need to be made to make our arts as diverse as they should be, and to make all those people that are diverse comfortable working in the arts.
I think probably the highlight of my day has been Amy Trigg's performances, simply because the brilliance with which she conveys what she can really add to our understanding of disability.
But everyone's just really interesting, and there's a really strong debate going on at the moment, and it's nice to talk one-on-one with people.
I think today's been a really good conversation. It's been an opportunity for colleagues working in the sector to share best practice, and today's challenge is very much about how we begin to address diversifying the workforce and the leadership.
Let's continue the conversation, keep showcasing great examples, and start thinking about where we want to be.
I just think it's really important to keep having these conversations, to actually physically getting people in a room together and drilling down on some of the issues that are really going to drive us forward for the next century.
Just do it. We're risk takers. Just do it.
Wise words from Michelle Taylor, and happy memories of appearing on the set of Cinderella at Nottingham Playhouse last year. Now the moment you've all been waiting for, questions to our panel from you, our audience, and they've been pouring in. The first we've got is from email from Liz Pugh at Walk the Plank. She asks, how can smaller organisations best diversify their networks and workforce, especially when time is tight and deadlines are looming? Nick?
Well, it's not easy. I mean, I've worked in small organisations some time ago, but it's always a challenge because you've got so many deadlines coming at you. I think the only way you can deal with this, Andrew, is really to build networks, to build partnerships, to know people out there with whom you can work when you face a crisis or a difficulty or a challenge of any kind. If you can do that, plan ahead, you stand a good chance.
Wise words. Now, let us move on to, we've had a number of questions about class on email and Twitter. From Sarah Fisher at OpenEye around encouraging people to come into the sector from working class backgrounds, and from James, David and Tom Stocks asking why data doesn't include socio-economic background. Can I come to you first, Mark?
Social class has always been a really important part of our equalities approach. We have specialist recruitment activities focused on ensuring that we have good numbers of working class students. We're about a third of our students are from working class backgrounds. Working class young people they have high aspirations. It's not that they lack aspiration to move into the creative sector, but barriers are put in their way, and our focus is on ensuring that those barriers are removed. I think it's really important as well to remember that people aren't just working class, they aren't just gay, they aren't just disabled, that intersectionality is an important part of this discussion as well, and we need to be very conscious of that.
Abid.
Well, class and socio-economic background have always been part of our definition of diversity at the Arts Council, but we've actually built an equality objective to look at social mobility and class in particular over the next couple of years. So we're currently working with Dr. Susan Oman, who's at the University of Manchester, just to look at some of the kind of metrics and the indicators that we could use to begin to capture that data. So there's a bit more work and data available on audiences, but less so on the workforce and the leadership. And that's something we want to get to, where we can report on that data in addition to the protected characteristics.
Thank you both, and I hope that answers that question. Now we move on to Chris Johnson on email, who's asked a question around access for audiences. How can we better improve the diversity of audiences and make practical steps to include those with access requirements? Can I come to you, Lisa, on this one?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of things that you can do, as in through the programming that you do, or on how you and where you deliver the work, that you're doing that. And I think also it's about what you say as an organisation, because if audiences are confident in you as an organisation, then they're more likely, we talked about the trust word earlier, and actually come and try things with you as an organisation. I think it's about audience members self-identifying about what's going on in stage or in the workshop room or within the workforce that are delivering that work. And also there are lots of other barriers that we can't overcome, as in sort of the transport issues, or young people being mobile and not having parent chauffeurs or whatever to take them round. But looking at pricing and how we do that, so at BSL we do Kids for a Quid, for example, to try and make the concert hall a bit more accessible for our main evening concerts. But you know, we're really seeing to start a change with all those things that we're starting to do at the BSA.
And Nick, any insights on audiences here from you?
Well, I think it's really, Andrew, a question of not just attracting audiences, but holding on to them and building them. And you do that, I think, by consistent programming, not just one production a year that addresses some of these questions, but right the way through the year. And you build confidence, and you build trust, and you build a desire to go and watch or become involved in things that you've never thought you would enjoy.
It's about working across the board in that sense.
It is.
I think we've got time for one last question, which we've received from a number of emails, which is around progress really being too slow on diversity. Nick, how would you respond as chair of the Arts Council to that?
Well, progress has been too slow. There's no question about it. I think Abid was referring earlier to some of the successes in terms of appointments of artistic directors and so on. I think the Arts Council has to keep the conversation live. It has to keep coming up with the data. I have to write to chairs and encourage them to be a bit more active. And I think we need to celebrate success when it occurs. And I think next year we'll see an improvement probably in the figures, because the portfolio itself has become broader. But I'm interested in seeing an increase and improvement on a like-for-like basis, as well as a result of having brought a large number of more diverse organisations into the portfolio itself.
So we'll watch this space and we'll come back next year and look at what the figures tell us then.
Well, we'll come back next year with the figures, but I think we'll come back during the year with further discussion on several of these issues, particularly I think the socio-economic issue, where I think we need to make some progress.
Thank you very much, Nick. Well, thanks to all of you who sent us questions. If we didn't answer yours, we will get back to you in the days to come. We've now come to the end of our live stream, and before we go, I'd just like to say thank you to Abid, Nick, Mark, Caroline and Lisa for taking part and joining us today, and to let you know that a version of this webinar will go up on the Arts Council's website later this week. The Arts Council's diversity publication is now available, and accompanying materials can be found at www.artscouncil.org.uk/diversity. And finally, from all of us here at the Barbican, thank you for watching. Goodbye.